Hello and thank you for joining me today. My name is Laura and you can find my cards and craftiness everywhere online as Crafty Not Shifty. So I really wanted to make this video today because I so often see in creative Facebook groups or people's blogs and Instagram that they're struggling with their creativity and that they feel like they're in a rut and that they can't find their way back to enjoying their craft. So I wanted to create a video with 5 tips and tricks to get you out of a creative rut and get you back in your crafty happy space again. I know that I've found these tips useful in the past and I'm hoping that you will too. Okay, so let's get straight in with idea number 1. So for this first idea, I have to give full credit to Justine Hovey. This is a video that she shared quite a while back now, possibly even a couple of years ago, and I'll have a link below to her channel and to her video. And she described a really easy way to create a card when you're in a creative rut, and it was to do some masked stencil ink blending. Stencils are an inexpensive supply that many of us have in our stash, and you can easily mix up the look and the feel of this card by changing the section that you mask off, the stencil that you use, or the colours and the sentiment that you use. So here I'm using 3 colours of Distress Oxide ink, and I'm applying those with a mini ink blending tool. I'm being careful to make sure that I only apply the ink in the masked off sections, and that I don't go outside the lines of the masking tape. I'm working from lightest to darkest over the top of this stencil, and I'm working directly on my card base. This will make a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card when it's folded across. So here I'll peel off the masking tape and fold the card, and then I'll add the sentiment. This sentiment is from a large, I believe it's the Big Brush Script sentiment set from Simon Says Stamp, and this is a great set that I find myself reaching for often. I'm using the Sending Big Hugs and just stamping that down using some VersaFine Onyx Black ink, which gives a really nice black crisp sentiment. And there you have it, super quick and easy for idea 1. So idea 2 is going to be creating an inky background to place your stamped image on. I'm working first with my stamped image, and this is a crocodile from the Heavy Doodle Happy Snappy Croc stamp set, and I'll make sure to have all of the supplies used listed in the description below. I've stamped using Memento Tuxedo Black because this is a alcohol ink friendly ink, which means that it won't bleed or smear as I use my alcohol inks all over the top of this image. I'm using some Copic markers. I don't have an awful lot of Copic markers, but I'm using a couple of different shades of green, and you could go ahead and use whichever colouring medium that you're used to using. So once I've added a little bit of shading and detail to my crocodile, I'll go ahead and cut him out. There are matching dies available for this stamp set, but I don't have them, so I'm using my scissors to fussy cut around this image, and I'm leaving a white border as if I'd used the dies. If you're not comfortable with fussy cutting, you could always apply this to your background and then use some masking fluid to mask off the coloured section of your crocodile before you start creating your inky background. Once I'm happy with the cutting, I'll start working on the background. And so for this, I've again got my Distress Oxides. You could use your Distress Oxides or your Distress inks, or any inks that will water down nicely to create this kind of smushed background. I'm using my stamp block and I'm applying the ink directly over the top and then adding some water and smushing that down onto the card. This helps to give a little bit more control over where the ink lands, and you can see straight through that stamp block to see how the image is going to look. I'm using the same colours that I used for that first card, but you'll see here that working this way gives a completely different look. For my purple colour, I decided to flick the ink onto the top of the surface using a paintbrush after I'd watered down that ink, just to add some more splatters and interest to the background. Once this piece was dry, I went back in with some more water, and just like I did the first time, and added some splatter marks on the background, and you can see that that helps to lift away the ink. I trimmed this piece down and added some foam tape onto the back, and then I'll stick this down to a 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch note card. And you can see already that's a really fun background. You could work on this differently. You could use your alcohol inks to create a background, you could ink blend an entire piece, or you could use a background stamp if you prefer. Now I have my crocodile mounted with foam tape. I'll place him down on the left hand side, and then all that's left to do is add a sentiment. I'll again be using my Misty for this. It just helps with the positioning, and you can certainly use a stamp block if that's what you're more comfortable using. I've taken 3 stamps from the stamp set that will spell out Happy Snappy Birthday, and I've arranged them in a whimsical arrangement on the card base and picked them up using the lid of my MISTI, and then I'll stamp those down again using Onyx Black ink. This is one of my favourite inks for sentiments, and I'll have a video linked below that explains more about different types of ink. So for idea 3, I'm keeping it really clean and simple and adding some grey ground onto a simple image. For this I'm using 3 cupcakes from a Love from Lizzie Sweet Treats stamp set. This is a stamp set that I helped to create in collaboration with Love from Lizzie, so this one is particularly close to my heart, so I'm really excited to use that for you today. And I'm stamping again with a Copic friendly ink. I'm using my MISTI to stamp multiple times to get really nice dark lines on this piece. Because it is a clean and simple image, I wanted to make sure that those lines were extremely prominent, as that is the focal point of the card. Again, I'm using my Copics to add some colour, and I'm keeping this quite girly in the colour scheme I've noticed looking back at these videos, and I'm using a lot of pinks and purples on these pieces. They must have been colours that I was in the mood to use when I created all of these cards. Now here is where the magic comes in with this technique. If you use a ruler and create a straight line underneath your images of grey, and then softly blend that out, you create a really subtle but effective ground for your stamped image. And you could do this with a person that you have stamped, or with a different image like I have here with these cupcakes, and it just kind of brings the whole card together and completes that image. So I have a sentiment here from the same stamp set that says, "You are the sweetest," and it works really well with those cupcakes, and I've stamped that down, again just using my MISTI. This time I'm going to stick the panel directly onto the card base, and again I've trimmed it down to be slightly smaller than my card base to leave that white edge. You can see this card took no time at all to put together, and certainly helps you get that sense of accomplishment, which is often all you need to get those creative juices flowing again. So idea 4 is going to be spotlight stamping. I'm using this beautiful peacock stamp from So Susie Stamps. This is Phineas the Peacock if you haven't met him before. And I'm using a light coloured ink, I believe it's the Fog colour from Simon Says Stamp, and I'm repeatedly stamping onto my background. The white piece that I have behind my card base is a laminated piece of cardstock that I can wipe clean when I'm finished. I'm now using some anti-static powder tool to get rid of any static cling on my card base, and then I'm stamping Phineas one more time in Versamark. I'm now going to pour a gold embossing powder over the top, and then tap away any of the excess and heat set this image. Because of the gold shine on this final peacock, he will stand out from the rest of that background, meaning that you've created a really quick and easy background paper that coordinates perfectly with your stamp, and you've been able to highlight him. If you don't have embossing powders, you could try this with a different coloured ink, so you had a bold version of Phineas in the foreground and some lighter versions in the background. Again, I've reached for the Simon Says stamp set and used the Missing You Always. I've stamped this in a bold black ink, again just to help that sentiment pop from the card base. Now I'm taking a finger dauber and I'm applying some ink to the edges of this panel, and that will just frame this piece really nicely. I'm using the same ink that I stamped the background peacocks in. And there you have it, this is another really easy way to get creating. So my final method is to use a card sketch. My favourite things have an incredible blog with all different card sketches on there. You can go back and look at historic ones, or you can look at recent ones, and I'm sure there are more examples out there. If you Google card sketch ideas, you will be flooded with different ideas of ways to create your card and where you can put different elements. If you're using the most recent sketch on one of these challenges, you can go ahead and link your image and be entered for a chance to win a gift certificate. All you need to do with these sketches is take the initial outline and then either use pattern papers or stamping or a combination of the two to mimic that design. So you'll see here I wasn't quite happy with how I'd cut this piece, so I just marked it with a pencil and trimmed it down. It tends to be that with card sketches you're either given a colour theme or a design to follow, and there are no measurements provided. You can just use your own intuition with this and really make it your own with how you want it to look. I've just taken some pattern paper from my stash and cut it into roughly the shapes that are shown on the sketch. Here I have a black piece of cardstock that I've prepped with an anti-static powder tool, and I'll be stamping the Treat Yourself sentiment from the Love from Lizzie stamp set that I used earlier. I'm inking the stamp up with Versamark and then stamping that down across this banner, and I'll add some white embossing powder. I really like the look of white embossing powder on a black card base, and it's the only really way to get that really bright white onto a black. So I'm eyeballing where I want this to sit, and then trimming off the excess and gluing that down. And again, another really quick and easy way that you can get those creative juices flowing and create something to help you get out of a rut. I'll then go ahead and glue this down to my pre-scored note card, and that will finish up the card. I think another really great thing about these sketch challenges is being able to scroll through different people's entries to the challenges and to see how they've interpreted the sketch design. I do hope that you found this video useful and that you're feeling inspired to try one or more of these easy, quick tips. I'll quickly bring each of the cards back on screen and give you a recap of the process. First of all, we had the masked ink blending through a stencil. Then we created a messy background using some distress ink and added an image on top. The third card was a clean and simple design, adding a grey ground to really frame up those images. The fourth card used spotlight stamping to create a background and then a foreground image on the card, and finally we used a card sketch. Hopefully this video has been able to get your creative juices flowing again and you're feeling inspired to get back in your craft room. If you do recreate one of these designs, I'd love to see it. Feel free to tag me on Instagram or any other social media. And if this hasn't quite done the trick and you want some more videos, I have a couple linked on screen right now. If you haven't already done so, you can go ahead and click on my logo to subscribe to this channel, and I hope to see you back here again soon. That's all from me. Bye for now.